Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Second and Saints. John Hendricks and Ross Jackson. So happy to be back in the boot, Ross.
Man.
I mean,
man,
it was just, we had fun in Cali, but it was just time to come home. Like, I think at the point where everybody was just kind of just ready. And that last practice, you felt it. Game, you just felt it. But
100%.
Happy to be back, right?
Very, very happy to be back. I'm a weirdo and I love the heat. And so getting away from California and getting back to my home climate meant a lot to me.
Yeah, it's you and Jake Haener. Because Jake Haener was like, it's going to be 118. He's like, no big deal, I guess. So, but day 19 of Saints training camp over at Yulman Stadium over here at Tulane. First exposure for fans. I know it was hard not to have them out in California, but seeing them out here gave a little bit more energy, a little bit more juice to practice. There's so many things that we could take away from here. They were just in shells, but still a good practice they put in. We could start with the Derek Carr in the game sequence drive, or we could start with Charlie Smyth. I think that was the more exciting one, personally, just because he made that 65-yard field goal look effortless and he had room to spare on it. So where do you start?
I got to start Derek Carr, man. I got to start with the quarterback.
I know. That's what really matters. I get it. Charlie Smyth is the flashy toy. Derek Carr is the one that, just the consistent thing that you just go back to every time, right? Like, that type of thing.
Yeah. And this was a big showing for him, right? Because the whole thing, one of the biggest reasons why the Saints wanted Derek Carr was not only the connection between Derek Carr and Dennis Allen, but because they felt that he was really good in those end of game situations. So when they gave him 1 minute and 58 seconds on the clock here tonight to drive 65 yards for a touchdown, it kind of made him feel right at home in front of a home crowd. And I thought that it was a good performance for him, and one that he kind of needed in front of a home crowd that's been a little bit embattled in terms of who should be the quarterback and all these other things. It's Derek Carr, but I think there was a nice kind of prove it moment for him.
Yeah, I know it was a little bit tough early on because I know a lot of people saw the check downs, but he moved the sticks. That big connection to Jordan Mims on the sideline that we saw firsthand, working against Demario Davis, that was beautiful. And then you kind of get a little bit of help with the pass interference that puts you at the 9. But look, he looked good in red zone. And it wasn't just in team at this end of game. Like, he looked good in team. He looked pretty good in 7-on-7. But when it counted, when it mattered most, hooking up for Foster Moreau, who I thought had a really good practice out here. I think he's been low-key really, really just putting into work. And Dennis Allen, like we've said this, he's a guy that just comes to work every day, right? And he just does it. And Dennis Allen saying, like, there's nothing flashy really, kind of like, you know what I mean? It's just Foster, right? But he had a really good showing, but just seeing him go to work in the 2-minute was really nice. And again, this is the offense that we're going to see all the time, right? So it makes sense that you really want to see it out of Derek Carr.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things that you really love about like Foster Moreau's effort in this is that he never stops moving.
Right.
Like he understands, and this is maybe a little bit of that chemistry between him and Derek Carr and what they bring from the Raiders, Oakland/Las Vegas, is that like they have spent so much time doing this together and everything that when Derek Carr's working on one side, Foster Moreau kind of knows where Derek Carr likes him to be and where he's going to look for him and all these other things. I'm sure that they have a lot of things that work together too, in terms of like, hey, you're really good if you do this and then do this, and I'll be looking for that and all these other things. I think there's a lot of that sort of chemistry stuff that's outside of the playbook, that's outside of the structure. And sometimes you have to go to that, especially when you're running this kind of play action bootleg, play action rollout kind of heavy offense. And they do a lot of that in the red zone. Dennis Allen highlighting when we asked him about red zone and what they've been doing, their ability to run in the red zone sets all that up. And so then you bring their connection into it. And I think that it gives them a little bit of comfort, a little bit of familiarity.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the thing early on, it was a little struggle bus early on, right? Like, I mean, there was a lot of missed opportunities. Him and Chris Olave weren't on the same page. Are you worried about that? Because I know fans got to see this today, right? Like, they saw it firsthand. It was not what we've been seeing in training camp, I think, is the biggest thing. But are you concerned that it just wasn't their night to shine? I mean, he did get an end zone in sevens, right? Like, but just overall, there was some missed opportunities there. Balls behind him, a couple of different throws.
Yeah, I think that the consistent sort of ball being behind Chris Olave as he's working adjacent, or rather, what would it be? Perpendicular. Yeah. Perpendicular to the ends, to the boundary line and all those other things, like heading towards out of bounds on those out routes and corner routes and things like that. I think that's something that's got to get cleaned up. Yeah. I don't want to say that I'm worried about it, but I don't think it's okay either. You know what I mean? It's one of those things where those guys it's one of those pieces that they have to work on. And look, sometimes look, you're on unfamiliar turf in an unfamiliar environment, throwing in unfamiliar sort of situations and territories and things like that. This is a college field that's been sort of designed into being an NFL field for them in terms of hash marks and all these other things. There's a lot of these kind of inconsistencies that happen. I'm really excited to see what they look like back into sort of their comfort zone of the dome on Friday night, but then also back at the facility these next couple of days.
Yeah, I agree. And the thing is, it's just file it in your back pocket. They got time to work on this. I'm not that worried at this point, but again, it's just going to be a thing, right? That people are going to, they saw it and now it's a thing. And, they've worked hard on this for months, right? Like, I just don't think one practice spells all the problems in the world for this particular deal, but they are going to be counted on. Some really good news out there. Alvin Kamara, he was back out there. Juwan Johnson, Taliese Fuaga. You got even Ugo Amadi out there. Like, you got a whole bunch of the band back together.
Michael Jacobson.
Michael Jacobson,
the
love
star
here.
Of training camp.
But no Kendre Miller. Still no Kendre Miller, right? We're day 19, no Kendre Miller. That's really unfortunate. Rico Payton wasn't out there. He's dealing with a shoulder injury. He got hurt in the game against the 49ers, got checked out. He's fine. Like, he's going to be okay. He should be out at practice, coming up soon. But just getting those three back, Alvin, Juwan, and Taliese, they didn't really do a ton, whereas we saw DeMario get more into team drills and stuff, but getting those three back on the field, and Paulson Adebo was here. That was good to see him, obviously, put a helmet on and get some work in. I'm not going to knock on wood and I'm not going to jinx it, but this is a good sign for the Saints after everything that we've seen.
Yeah, this is the exact reverse of what we've seen so far through training camp, the team getting players back as opposed to losing players. Now, of course, they didn't have Kool-Aid McKinstry today, but it sounds like that's all going to be fine and that he'll be ready to go week one. But look, he's not a guy that's necessarily going to be needed week one as much as your starting corners and guys like Paulson Adebo, who made his way back out to the field. And then, you'll see where things go with Marshall Lattimore, but it feels like he's going to be ready to go once the season rolls around. So we'll see where all that goes. But getting players back is a very welcome sight for this team, which has dealt with a lot of injuries, a lot of losses here over the course of training camp. So it was really good to see them. And it's almost kind of like we talked about it too, that like when they would get back to New Orleans, all of a sudden these guys are going to be like, all right, I got the humidity back. My joints are feeling good. Like, I'm ready to go. You know what I mean? We mentioned that some of these players had time to come out in New Orleans and get right, and hopefully they'll be out here. And again, it was still a spirited practice. Like, it was still a good one, but this is the time where we were going to get a lot of questions answered with some of these players and what their ailment is. And again, I don't know the severities of a hamstring injury, why one heals faster than the other, or why a player like Juwan Johnson can come back from a fractured foot and he's back on the field first. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, I just don't know. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not a doctor, but that is a lot concerning for Kendre Miller, right? Like, and you got these other running backs that are stepping up, right? Jordan Mims looked really good out there. I think so. I think he had a good preseason. He's low key. We've been talking about Jordan Mims for what seems like months now. I think we talked about him for like almost a year. Like, we talked about him last year too.
Yeah, we did, to be fair. So, I mean, go back to those past episodes. Don't forget to like, subscribe, all that fun stuff. But not just him, but James Robinson getting a little bit of love. And we've talked about him too. Like, he's been a guy that's done this already, but, and even Jacob Kabote's putting some things together. Like, they kind of have a conundrum here, but like all three of these guys with no Kendre Miller in the mix, like Kendre Miller's got to be a little bit worried at this point. And the Saints, they're getting a really healthy look at all these other running backs. What point do they say, okay, we feel like we're comfortable with Jordan Mims? Are they going to give Kendre a shot when he comes back? Or is this just going to be like, okay, we've seen what we've seen from these other guys and we're going to keep with them?
I think you give him a shot, but it depends on when he comes back, right? I mean, like, this is the thing that makes it so tricky. So if he comes back sometime this week, great. If he doesn't come back and you end up making him maybe one of the couple of moves that you put him on injured reserve at roster cuts or something like that, and then you try to bring him back after a few weeks, then, you give him time. You could have a 3-week practice window at that point, some time to maybe impress you or something like that. And then by week 7, week 8, maybe he's back on the actual playing field. It's just at that point, what have you already found with these other guys? And like, what's your rhythm with these other guys and everything like that? Like, that's where I think things get a little complicated. So the sooner the better. I mean, I know that's like hashtag analysis. Great job, Ross. You're so smart. But like, the sooner the better in this situation, because I think the longer that he's out, the more complicated things will get.
Yeah, and I mean, he has to pick up this new offense. And look, we said that we expected a big year out of Kendre Miller and stuff, and now it's just like to have this happen. It's unfortunate because now you're talking about a player that I feel like is on the bubble, and Dennis Allen has called him out about it. Him and the younger players, if you can't be available, how can they make an analysis and a roster evaluation on these guys? So look, maybe it changes when we get the next couple of practices that are going to be outside over in Metairie, and then they got the Superdome practice. Hopefully we see him at some point because that's going to be the first step, but we're not even seeing him like working off to the side and all this other stuff. But, we'll see how that kind of plays out. Before we talk, I guess, about Charlie Smyth, Spencer Rattler's last drive in the game didn't go so well for him. Jake Haener was number 2 for all intents and purposes. And again, based off of what we've seen, it looks like Rattler will probably be the second half guy this week. So against the Titans, but his drive didn't go that well. Caleb Ford DeMint almost had him on one pick on the sideline, but then got the other one from Kevin Austin Jr., which is a guy we've been hyping up. It just it's tough. Like he didn't have a great preseason showing against the 49ers, and then this interception goes off his hands, tip drill, and it's into the hands of Ford DeMint. I don't put that on Rattler, but at the same time, this is kind of where we're at because we haven't really talked since the preseason game, but neither quarterback, I think, took a step forward based off of that game.
Yeah, right. Good point. I don't think either of them really took a step forward here tonight either. And look, I don't hold the interception against Rattler either, but earlier in the drive, he had an out route to Brian, I always want to say Brian Austin, to Kevin Austin. That was too high. That was up high. He had to reach out of the frame and then go and grab that. Then he had the one on the miscommunication or whatever happened with Stanley Morgan Jr. that Ford DeMint almost picked off at a later point or at an earlier point. And so then you have both of those, and then you compound that with this interception that got tipped up. That's not Spencer Rattler's fault, but it's still not going to be, it's not making his day better. You know what I mean? It's not making his day any better. So I think that's the thing that really kind of happened there. I thought that Jake Haener had a pretty solid day. He just didn't get a lot of action. I don't really have a ton of standout moments from him, but he did have a really nice play action boot to the right side where he connected with Mason Fairchild over the middle, or rather in the intermediate right area of the field and stuff like that. And then he looked pretty solid in 7-on-7s, going 2 of 3 in that area. But, for the most part, today felt like if any quarterback stood out, it was Derek Carr, which I guess if you want any of them to stand out, it's going to be the starter. But these two guys that are battling, still not able to separate from one another. When one does great, the other one does great. When one does poorly, the other one does poorly.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those situations where Ty goes to the runner. Like it's still Jake Haener that would back up. I would say that. And Jake had a fantastic practice last week. I don't think Spencer Rattler had his best week of practice. And again, the game kind of dictated everything, right? And so it's something to be figured out. But again, so many people want to talk about the guy that's not number 4 to be their quarterback and stuff. But the reality is that, I don't know that I'd say that either quarterback are ready at this point, but at the same time, it's just, there's still some ways to go. Right. I think the offensive line play was pretty good. Obviously no Chase Young. He was excused for a personal reason, which Dennis Allen said that's a good thing, but he's going to let Chase say the news. So we kind of have some ideas, but of course we're going to let Chase Young break the news for that. But, I thought the protection was a little bit good or better. Good. A little bit good. Oli Udo's taking some snaps at right tackle. Yeah. Again, Dennis Allen saying that the left guard and right tackle spot's not set in stone. But I got to tell you, I mean, again, going back to the preseason game, I think Trevor Penning had a pretty good game. Like it wasn't great. I wouldn't say the great category, but I definitely said it was pretty good to good.
Yeah, I thought that he made improvements in that game, did a much better job with his pad level, did a really good job of keeping his behind back and keeping his anchor down and all these other things. Didn't get run over at any point. He kind of got toppled a couple times by being up too high against the Arizona Cardinals. Went up against a kind of a second string defense against Arizona, went up against kind of a second string defense against San Francisco too, and he did better. And so good, I mean, it's a step in the right direction. But I think they're going to try to gather as much information as they can, and really like a good measuring stick for Trevor Penning is if Arden Key and Harold Landry play in this preseason game on Sunday, because Arden Key just had his 6-game suspension at the beginning of the season overturned. And so maybe now, because he's going to play week 1 and he hasn't played in the preseason yet, maybe he does get an opportunity to play here. And Trevor Penning struggled against Arden Key a lot last year. And so what better way to kind of put a barometer to your improvements than to go up against the same guy that beat you a bunch last year to open up the season. So I'm excited to see this weekend what we get from Trevor Penning.
Yeah, and I think it's still one of those situations where what if I read between the lines, like he's playing in this game. Like it doesn't matter if the starters are playing. Trevor Penning's playing, right?
Yeah,
Lucas Patrick is playing because they still got to figure out that spot. And so we'll see. I mean, it's still yet to be determined, but I don't think the pass protection was a liability today. I guess that's where I would say. And so, look, as we kind of wind down here, a little bit shorter format because it's a little bit late and we got practice and we're still getting used to being back from Cali time. But Charlie Smyth, man, 7 of 8 today. He stole the show, I think, for a little bit, kicking that 60-yarder. He got one from 65 that could have been good from over 70. It's interesting because we know he has the leg. We just don't know about the consistency and the accuracy. That's the only thing that's holding him back. And, Dennis Allen said as much that, in 40-yard range, that's where he needs to see the more consistency, which is obviously Blake Groupie. But we've kind of talked about Charlie Smyth. There's not a pressure on him to make this roster at this moment. But, man, I got to tell you, it's hard because you get situations. I wished in San Francisco that they kicked some of those. I was hoping that they would. But, Charlie Smyth, really good showing. Got the miss, but I don't know what else we could say about that night.
Yeah, I mean, he had a great night tonight, and this is really impressive for a guy that's been playing football for no amount of time. And he actually finished 8 of 9 because he also had the extra point in the Derek Carr touchdown drive. And so a great day. I mean, he missed one from 55, re-kicked it, made both of his kicks from 40. Basically, he started him at extra point, then they went to 40, 45, 50, 55, and so on. It just kind of went up in increments of 5 all the way up to 65. And boy, he drained that 65-yarder. But look, he hit the 40 and the 45-yard in the extra point too. And Dennis Allen said that what you do within the 50s is really the thing that they're more concerned about in terms of a consistent level. It's just kind of what you kick more often in those situations. And today he had a nice showing from that range too. So I don't know. I mean, even right now, like if he's making those kicks right now, I can't wait to see what he's doing in a year from now. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's big, especially if, we've pointed out if Groupie looks for a big payday or something like that. There's things that we don't see necessarily and we're not thinking about, but I guarantee the front office has thought about some of that or had some of those thoughts and such, played some of that out. But, look, it was a good showing for Charlie Smyth. A really good showing for Matt Hayball again. He had some really good hang times. And, I think we're the only nerds that really talk about special teams. I know that really. But, again, it's not a notice. And it's one of those areas where it's not a problem until it's a problem, right? I think that's the biggest thing there for special teams. But I got to tell you, it's going to be really interesting this final week of practice to see all these like small roster battles. You got it at linebacker, you have it on the offensive line, running back, some wide receiver stuff. Like every position on the roster, there's so many spots I feel like that's up for grabs. And this competition that they've preached all training camp, hopefully we finally see it come to a close, with the Titans game. But I'm psyched to see all this competition this week.
Yeah, even the safety position today was just fun to watch. They had Jonathan Abram, then they went to Will Harris, then they went to Jordan Howden, then they went to JT Gray, all next to Tyrann Mathieu tonight. Like they gave everybody a look there. And so far we've seen Jonathan Abram and Will Harris start there when it comes to the preseason games. And so that's another spot where things continue to kind of rotate. So yeah, the position battles and things like that, particularly the ones that are most meaningful, the offensive line, secondary, stuff like that. Like it makes for good energy in these camps because everybody's fighting for something. And it makes for pretty solid preseason matchups too, because these preseason matchups are the ones that are going to teach this team a lot about those guys that are looking for those roster spots and looking for those jobs. And that includes practice squad guys too.
Yeah, I think that, most of the times practice or like when you go into the final preseason game, it's kind of like maybe 5 to 7 roster spots that you're kind of saying, okay, we feel like this is where we're at. I'd argue that it's probably a little bit more, and it based off of some of the results of this competition. I think the new kickoff rules obviously going to factor into it. Like there's just so many different things and factors that are going to play into the assembling in this final roster. And I got to tell you, some of these good players are going to be probably left on the outside looking in. And, hopefully you can bring him back on a practice squad. But, I wonder what the future is for guys like Mason Tipton now. He was started hot, hamstring injury. I don't know when we're going to see him soon or if we're going to see him soon. I don't know that we've had any more answers at the wide receiver position. You know what I mean? I think it's still kind of iffy. No Rashid Shaheed again out there dealing with a toe foot injury. But, it's still a lot to figure out for this team. But again, I still think it's trending in the right direction. I don't look at the preseason results. A win's great, but I liked what I saw from the starting offense. I feel like this team is starting to move the needle in the right direction, but I'm not ready to crown them. I still think 9 wins until I see something else. You know what I mean? Like, that's where I feel. Anything else that stood out from today, or anything that you want to bring up before we get out of here?
No, I don't think so. I think we hit everything. Somebody did ask about how Bub Means looked tonight. I think he had a couple of catches, but I don't think he really had like any real standout moments or anything like that. I believe that he did have one in the end zone, though, if I remember correctly. I'll have to go back through the notes to see. I might be wrong on that, but I know he had a post over the middle from Jake Haener in sevens. That's what I was thinking about. It's where he had a nice catch in the middle of the field there. Really nice and well-placed pass by Jake Haener on that one as well. So he's had some moments. I agree with you, though. Still not a lot shaken out when it comes to that wide receiver position behind guys like Chris Olave. I know Rashichi, he's injured, but he's a lock. Cedric Wilson and A.T. Perry. I think outside of those guys, you're still seeing guys maybe scrap for that 5th position. And with the night that Kevin Austin had tonight, I think that kind of opens up more of that competition for that spot too.
Yeah, I agree. Another question that was in there, Marshawn Lattimore. I didn't see him out here. Doesn't necessarily mean anything. And again, we got practice on Wednesday, Thursday, and then they got the Superdome practice on Friday. So we'll be looking for him, but it'll be interesting to see what capacity we see Marshawn Lattimore, because he was ramping up. He's in that ramp up period, but all signs point for him to be ready for week 1, but we definitely want to see him out there and such. But man, Ross, time flies as always on Second and Saints. Definitely make sure you go check out Locked On Saints. Give them a like, subscribe if you already haven't, which I'm sure all of you have. But and then LouisianaSports.net, definitely go check them out. They're hitting the ground running. So make sure you support Ross in that endeavor. Don't forget to like, subscribe to Second and Saints, and visit all those links in below and help us support the show. We got a whole lot of things, a lot of fires in the or irons in the fire. Is that there right? Yeah, iron is in the fire. Like, I can't even get the words out. In the iron. Irons in the fire. You guys know what you get with this show. Come on now. But that's going to do it for us on Second and Saints. We'll be back and talk at you on Wednesday. Thanks so much for your support. Y'all have a good night.